I've never been to an Academy Award. Now, if I sit here in my chair, where I must be honest with myself so that I'll progress and my character will improve.
For decades, Katharine Hepburn was Hollywood's Iron Woman, fearless, sharp-tongued, and seemingly untouchable. The public knew of her lifelong bond with Spencer Tracy, but behind that image was a hidden life, a private list of 7 women she allegedly dated in secret. Relationships that collapsed into denial, betrayal, and grudges she carried for the rest of her life, even while she remained emotionally tied to Tracy. Was Katharine Hepburn protecting her dignity or settling old emotional scores she never admitted out loud? Let's find out. And once you hear who they were, her strong feelings will suddenly make sense. Number 1. Greta Garbo, the silence that turned into resentment. Katharine Hepburn was Hollywood's sharpest mind with the strictest private rules. Greta Garbo was the most famous mystery in the industry. When these two women crossed paths in the late 1930s, it looked like a scandal waiting to happen. They dated in secret. According to a biographer, Hepburn and Garbo avoided premieres, photographers, and studio dinners. Their connection lived in controlled spaces, private Manhattan apartments and weekends planned so they never arrived together. For a while, that balance held. Then it collapsed into something colder. Garbo didn't just pull away. She denied the affair ever happened, both publicly and privately. At a small New York gathering where several friends already knew about them, Garbo made her move. She walked in, locked eyes with Hepburn for a split second, then turned her back and began speaking about her complete solitude, laughing lightly about how she had never belonged to anyone. Hepburn understood instantly. Garbo left without saying goodbye. That night, Hepburn reportedly expressed intense frustration in private, telling a confidant, "She used me when it suited her, then pretended I was a fantasy she never touched." From that moment, affection hardened into something darker. Garbo didn't call, didn't explain. She acted as if Hepburn had imagined everything. The meetings, the intimacy. For Hepburn, that was unforgivable. Years later, Hepburn made her contempt clear without naming Garbo. "I despise people who erase shared history to save their own image." They lived in the same city for years afterward. Friends overlapped, invitations crossed. Hepburn refused to be in the same room alone with Garbo ever again. When Garbo's name came up, Hepburn's expression reportedly tightened. Her tone clipped. This was resentment born from being used, then denied, and Hepburn never forgave the lie. Number 2. Joan Crawford, the woman who tried to control Katharine Hepburn. Joan Crawford didn't hide her hostility toward Katharine Hepburn. She staged it. According to a classic Hollywood columnist, the tension between Hepburn and Joan Crawford escalated quickly once they became emotionally close. The columnist wrote that Crawford never understood privacy, while Hepburn never tolerated performance in her personal life. That difference exploded in public. The first serious rupture occurred at a studio dinner attended by executives, including a producer whose assistant later confirmed the seating arrangement. Crawford arrived late and deliberately placed herself beside Hepburn. Mid-conversation, Crawford reached for Hepburn's arm and said loudly, "Kate doesn't need love. She needs to be watched." The room went quiet. Hepburn did not raise her voice. She calmly removed Crawford's hand and replied, "I don't confuse affection with an audience." That single sentence changed everything. From that night on, Crawford began inserting herself into Hepburn's public spaces. A film historian later documented that Crawford requested seating near Hepburn at award functions and premieres, forcing proximity. Hepburn's response was surgical. She would arrive late, leave early, or stand with her back turned. At a New York event documented by another columnist, Crawford leaned in and whispered, "You don't get to ignore me." Hepburn stood up, picked up her coat, and walked out mid-conversation. The columnist described the moment as glacial. Privately, Hepburn was far harsher. In a conversation recalled by a longtime friend, Hepburn said, "She doesn't want closeness. She wants control, and control is the one thing I will never give." That was the end. They never reconciled. They never softened with age. When Crawford's name surfaced in later interviews, Hepburn shut it down instantly. In a 1983 exchange, she cut a question short and said only, "I don't revisit battles that were finished years ago." Crawford wanted dominance. Hepburn answered with something more humiliating than anger. deliberate erasure. And in Hollywood, being erased by Katharine Hepburn was not an accident. It was a verdict. Number 3. Tallulah Bankhead, the secret affair that turned dangerous. Tallulah Bankhead wasn't just a friend who crossed a line. She was the one Katharine Hepburn later realized she should never have gotten involved with in the first place. By 1938, Tallulah Bankhead and Katharine Hepburn were spending time together in ways that went far beyond polite Hollywood friendship. A biographer documents that they shared late-night dinners at Bankhead's hotel suites in New York, often after theater performances, deliberately avoiding public venues. No assistance, just closed doors and trusted company. What made the relationship intoxicating also made it dangerous. Bankhead treated secrecy like a game. Hepburn treated it like armor. The rupture came during a private party hosted by a playwright. Bankhead, already several drinks in, began entertaining the room. Then she leaned back, glanced at Hepburn, and said with a grin, "Some people hide their pleasures. I prefer mine memorable." The room laughed. Hepburn went cold. Later that night, Hepburn confronted Bankhead directly in the hallway. According to the playwright, Hepburn's voice was low and controlled. "You think you're being brave. You're being careless." Bankhead laughed it off, saying, "Oh, Kate, relax. Everyone already guesses." That was the moment Hepburn decided it was over. The next day, Hepburn cut contact. No calls, no visits, no shared appearances. When Bankhead tried to reinsert herself weeks later with a playful note, Hepburn returned it unopened. Years later, Hepburn explained her philosophy without naming names. "In my world, trust isn't romantic, it's survival." The strong feelings that followed weren't about love gone wrong, they were about risk. Bankhead enjoyed flirting with exposure. Hepburn knew exposure could end everything. They never reconciled. Bankhead continued to hint, joke, and tease in private circles. Hepburn shut the door permanently. This was a secret affair that became a liability, and Hepburn eliminated the threat without hesitation. Number 4, Barbara Stanwyck, the secret bond that was quietly disowned. Barbara Stanwyck and Katharine Hepburn looked almost identical on the inside. Strong, controlled, private. That similarity was exactly why what happened between them turned difficult. By the early 1940s, Barbara Stanwyck and Katharine Hepburn had slipped into a connection that was never meant to be seen. Not friendship, but something deliberately hidden. According to a biographer, they arranged meetings with precision, late dinners after closing, long drives without drivers, weekends staggered so they never arrived or left together. For Hepburn, this secrecy meant trust. The betrayal came when Stanwyck decided to erase it. Calls stopped being returned. Plans were postponed, then quietly abandoned. No argument, no explanation, just a gradual withdrawal that left Hepburn standing alone with a reality Stanwyck refused to acknowledge. The confrontation finally happened at a producer's home during a small industry gathering. Hepburn took Stanwyck aside, her voice calm but edged with anger. "Are we pretending this never happened, or are you about to tell me why?" Stanwyck didn't hesitate. She replied evenly, "Some things are better left without names." That answer ended everything. To Hepburn, it wasn't caution, it was denial, a rewriting of history to protect comfort. She later told a close friend, "I don't hate weakness. I hate when people pretend I imagined intimacy." From that moment on, Hepburn shut the door. She didn't confront Stanwyck again. She didn't warn her. She didn't soften. At events, Hepburn stayed cordial but distant, never alone with her, never personal. Stanwyck noticed and accepted the distance. Years later, Hepburn summed up her philosophy in a line that those close to her recognized immediately. "Clarity is respect. Silence after closeness is cruelty." This was resentment born from denial, and it never healed. Part 5. Judy Holiday, when affection turned into a moral break. How does affection turn into something Katharine Hepburn refuses to forgive for the rest of her life? With Judy Holiday, the answer wasn't betrayal in the traditional sense. It was a betrayal of truth. In the late 1940s, Holiday was fragile behind the sparkle. Rising fast, anxious about contracts, terrified of being labeled, she leaned on Katharine Hepburn for protection. What began as guidance slipped into a private intimacy they worked hard to conceal. Here's the twist. Hepburn didn't see secrecy as shame. She saw it as loyalty. The fracture came when Holiday's fear overtook her nerve. Studio pressure mounted. Whispers traveled faster than facts. Instead of confronting the risk with Hepburn, Holiday chose distance. Quiet, careful, self-protective. The moment everything collapsed happened backstage at a studio production. Hepburn didn't circle the issue. She asked directly, "Are you stepping back or are you afraid?" Holiday didn't deny what they had shared. She lowered her voice and said, "I can't afford this right now." That sentence changed their relationship forever. Hepburn didn't raise her voice. She didn't negotiate. She went still. According to Hepburn's longtime friend, Hepburn replied, "Fear explains choices. It doesn't excuse erasing the truth." Within days, Hepburn cut contact completely. Calls went unanswered. Invitations stopped. When Holiday sent a soft, apologetic note weeks later, it was returned unopened. Not out of cruelty, but out of judgment. Years later, Hepburn summed up the line she would not cross. "I respect courage. I don't punish fear unless it pretends nothing happened." They never reconciled. Holiday died young. Hepburn never spoke her name publicly again. This was a verdict delivered once and never appealed. Behind Hollywood's most controlled legend were secret relationships that ended not in love, but in denial, erasure, and grudges Katharine Hepburn carried to the end. Which of these secret relationships do you think affected her the most? And which one crossed the line beyond forgiveness? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more untold Hollywood stories that were never meant to surface, like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications because this is only the beginning.